kitten?
They did some wonderful, funny, bizarre, strange stuff. A lot of it very, very good visually. And I think that they never got quite the recognition that I think they could have done.
It was always funny, and that was their genius. They could make a point and make quite a strong point without it being really offensive.
How did you do that?
I suspect I find it funnier now in its slight ghastliness than I would have at the time.
Once upon a time, there was a family show made for adults but appreciated by children. It had hit songs on Top of the Pops and was offbeat, silly and anarchic. A cartoon series featuring flesh and blood characters, The Goodies, launched onto our screens in 1970 and lasted for 9 series. Although hugely popular at the time, the shows have never been repeated, and it is possibly one of the most overlooked comedy programmes on British TV. In order to understand where it came from, we have to go back to the early 60s, where a group of bright young things were flexing their comedy muscles at Cambridge, when they probably should have been studying.
We met at Cambridge. They were in Footlights, and I was a bit scared of that because the Footlights were very clever and smart and posh.
I couldn't bring myself to join it, although I knew they were doing the sort of thing I would like to have done.
In hindsight, of course, these are big names, John Cleese and Graham Chapman and all these guys, but they were good friends, you know.
John Cleese went up to Cambridge in 1960 reading law. In 1961, the legal profession's loss was comedy's gain, when he joined the Cambridge Footlights, where David Frost was ruling the roost as president. Also joining that same year was Tim Brooke-Taylor, reading economics and politics. Then he changed to reading law and giggling at the back of lectures with John Cleese.
Tim was an almost perfect example of a fairly confident public school chap.
So, you're interested in joining the Secret Service, are you?
Yes, I am.
Splendid, splendid.
And he was funny, fairly conventional in his thinking, and very easy company.
Young men with good nerves. You have got good nerves, have you?
Yes, I think so.
Good. They're absolutely vital in the kind of work that everybody's doing.
Then in 1960, along came Bill Oddie, reading English, but he wasted almost 3 years before seeing the error of his ways and joining the Footlights.
Bill was more eccentric. He didn't give a damn about his dress, which always endeared him to me. He'd always dressed pretty much the same. He and a comb or brush were virtual strangers. He was the only one of us who was really talented musically.
My granny plays the organ, my sister plays trombone, my father is a Beatle, and my ma's a Rolling Stone.
By this time, David Frost had left Cambridge for a career in television, and the new president of the Footlights was Tim Brooke-Taylor, and so it was he who auditioned Graham Garden, reading medicine.
Tonight, I wish to tell you about Turgonitis.
Graham was almost professorial in a very attractive way. But I mean, Graham would go quietly to his desk in the evening and sit there for 4 hours. And what he was up to, I never knew.
That year's Footlights review was called A Clump of Plinths, 2 words which John Cleese was very keen on. The others then clumped together, and under its new name, Cambridge Circus, Cleese, Oddie and Brooke-Taylor toured the show around the country before finding themselves on Broadway.
It was bizarre because we got incredible reviews, and we did things like The Ed Sullivan Show.
Returning from the States, they soon infiltrated BBC Radio, which teamed the Cambridge Circus troupe with Graham Garden in 1964. Together they produced I'm Sorry I'll Read That Again, a show that became a byword for original comedy and cheesy old puns.
And now, here is an urgent terrapin joke.
I see. Who was that terrapin I saw you with last night?
That was no terrapin. That was our old schoolmistress. She taught us.
One of the facts about this interconnection thing is that Python and us are inextricably mixed.
David Frost was a bit of a magpie when it came to collecting talent, so the Frost Report cast its net wide to include writers and performers from not only Cambridge, but from Oxford too. These bright young things included John Cleese, Michael Palin, Graham Chapman, Terry Jones and Eric Idle. Does that group sound familiar? Adding lustre to this cluster was Marty Feldman, who had one eye on Hollywood. Meanwhile, Bill Oddie was making the satire boom noisier on the successor to That Was the Week That Was, cheekily entitled BBC Three.
'Cause poor old Roma got no goals at all. He's for Chelsea, I got that for Chelsea.
It was a general pool of people that got together in different manifestations, sort of like watching little amoeba under a microscope, all moving around and joining up with each other. And occasionally people would break into one group or another.
Rather like rock groups, you know, people sort of came and went and reorganised.
Over on ITV in 1967, Cleese, Brooke Taylor, Graham Chapman, the lovely Amy MacDonald and the slightly less lovely Marty Feldman starred in At Last the 1948 Show, the title referring to the time it took TV executives to decide to run a programme or not. Luckily, they ran this one and it gave some future household names the chance to try some of their offbeat characters in public.
Who are you for, England or Scotland?
What?
Who are you supporting?
I don't think I quite follow.
Excuse me.
Who are you?
My name is Feldman.
Oh, you're for England, then?
Yes, yes.
Look, you do realise this is ballet, do you?
What do you think we're here for, you tatty bogle, the ice cream? Come on, the Scottish National Ballet! Scottish National Ballet! Scottish National Ballet!
The Last the 1948 Show was a terrific opportunity.
Sir, can you tell me what you think of At Last the 1948 Show?
Well, it's rather difficult to say what's good about it.
I mean, do you like it?
Well, I don't know whether I like it or not.
Yes or no?
Yes, I do like it.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, on the BBC, Bill Oddie and Graham Garden pooled their talents with Terry Jones and Michael Palin on a weekly show amusingly entitled Twice a Fortnight.
Tim, as I say, as a member of 1948 Show, might have expected to be asked to be on Python.
And so it came about during the last few months of 1969 that a team put together by John Cleese invaded television, with what was a logical extension of all the surreal sketch material they'd been performing elsewhere. It was almost called Gwen Dibley's Flying Circus, until sanity prevailed and Monty Python's Flying Circus was born, without the talents of Tim Brooke Taylor.
When we rang up, Michael Palin, Terry Jones and Eric and Terry Gilliam said, why don't we do something together? It wasn't that we were sort of cutting Marty and Tim out of it, because they'd gone off on their own anyway.
And I remember having conversations about would I be interested, and I couldn't anyway, but to be honest, I think they're all better writers than I am, so I think probably I would have floundered a bit. Instead, I went and worked with Marty, who did a BBC series, which I loved, and there was some good stuff in that.
Excuse me, but Wedgwood Eaton? No, that was my brother. I was at Charterhouse, actually. Dreadfully sorry. I know why.
It ended up at one point where Tim and I were in a position to do something together, so we developed a series called Broaden Your Mind.
There was only one thing missing from this encyclopedia of the air, O for Oddie. But then Bill joined the team too. Brooke Taylor, Garden, then Oddie. The goodies can't be far away now.
Do you know why policemen were originally called peelers?
And then we were asked to do a third series, and they said, could you make it a little bit different?
And the most obvious way to make it different was for the three of us to do a show which used the same sort of comedy and ideas that people were using in 3-minute sketches, but to stretch it out into a half-hour storyline.
And we were trying to think, what should we call it?
It was one of those sort of wake up in the middle of the night things, you know, literally. We had got all these terrible names, and then suddenly, boing! The Goodies, yes, because it's the Goodies as opposed to the Baddies, like the Avengers, and there were lots of those shows around. Also, it sounded like a rock group.
It's whatever turns you on. Goodies.
So the third series of Broaden Your Mind became Narrow Your Mind, which almost became Super Chaps 3, until someone woke up in the middle of the night, luckily. Now they had the name, they had to work out what the Goodies actually did.
If you think about it, the concept was very simple. It was three guys who would do anything, anywhere, anytime.
We are the Goodies.
Yes, we know that.
And we are going to do good to people.
How wet! People will come to us and we will solve their problems with hilarious consequences.
The Goodies. Phone 083 1234. Anything, anytime. It's a bit vague.
They've got the premises and the agency and the computer, and they're up and running.
Over here is our little computer, designed by my own fair hand, guaranteed to solve any problem.
Didn't know quite where to place it in my mind. It was half a children's programme, half an adults programme, half an American monkeys type programme.
Take a little good advice. Try a trip to paradise.
I think it's generally commented that the characters were us, or at least extensions or exaggerations, caricatures of us.
Goodies are coming for you and you and you and you.
Bill and I used to do the bulk of the actual scripting.
Trim it down a bit, make a few cuts.
All right. Well, that can go for a start. So we would go through what we called a panorama list, which was if you were making serious programmes at the moment, what topics would they be about?
It's not a lot, is it? No, it isn't. But do it for now, make up the rest as we go along.
OK.
The beanstalk is apparently growing all over the country at quite a time.
Despite the satire, what people mainly remember from the show is the slapstick, for which the Goodies did their own stunts. That was not only brave, but cheap. Much of the credit for the show's visual effects must go to its first director, Jim Franklin. It was his cinematic skill that brought the Goodies' love of early cinema and cartoons to the small screen.
I suppose what we tried to achieve in the film sequences was a cross between silent movies and a real-life version of cartoon films like Tom and Jerry. So, you know, dreadful things had happened to people, but they'd jump up and run on.
It was very primitive. We were having to use exactly the same techniques as they'd used in silent comedies back in the 20s.
The slow-moving lorry knocks over Tim and Graham.
Right, cut the camera, we're still locked off.
Dummies are then put in their place.
Using every trick in the special effects handbook, plus a few more, the Goodies and Jim Franklin produced unforgettable images that became imprinted on the nation's consciousness and are still remembered today. But then, because the Goodies has never been repeated, we've seen nothing but those classic clips for the best part of 30 years.
There are about 3 or 4 shows which tend to come up the top of the memory list for viewers, you know. And The Giant Kitten tends to be one of them, Kitten Kong.
This is day 2 of Twinkle's occupation of the City of London.
It is very memorable, and it was pretty well done for the day.
People possibly just remember the sort of funny bits, like Ecky Thump, Bill hitting people with black puddings.
That particular programme has passed into a certain degree of legend because this guy died laughing at it. Anybody who does a comedy show, wouldn't you just love to say, this bloke died laughing at the show? And it's true, and his wife wrote to thank us. And this guy apparently had been building up laughing and then keeled over, had a heart attack and died, you know, with a big smile on his face.
Besides providing classic comedy moments to die for, what set the Goodies apart from other comedy shows was the attention paid to its music.
There'd been a tradition of comedy music for sitcoms. And there was some bloke, I can't remember his name now, who seemed to write all of them, you know, whatever sitcom was on. And it would always be boom, 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 wah, 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 you know, this sort of thing. And they used it on everything. It was awful stuff. And I just thought, let's have something hipper.
Look, we're fed up being Goodies. We've decided to hang up our halos, and we are going to become pop stars!
This brought Bill and the boys an unexpected bonus, the accolade of several appearances in the charts and, more importantly, on Top of the Pops.
I thought we're going to be 3 sad old gits going on Top of the Pops. And then we got there and looked round at the other performers, and they were sad old gits too, so I felt quite at home.
The funky give on.
Funky Gibbon.
We are here to show you how. The Funky Gibbon.
Funky Gibbon.
Just like you. Come on and do the Funky Gibbon now. The Funky Gibbon.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Star Safari Park. Over there, Steptoe and Son. And on your left...
The Goodies liked to get the stars of the day on their show and would imitate them if they had to. Even their pals from Monty Python were fair game. But if they caught a real-life celebrity, that was even better.
People never minded being sent up. I don't think they did. Only Blackburn was a sport.
Also, we had Jane Asher, who was one of our most distinguished, proper posh actress there.
Oh, well, this has changed a bit since I was last here.
When was that?
Lunchtime.
The struggle not to laugh as the spaghetti sauce was tipped over the head.
Oh, well, in that case, perhaps I'll have a little bit.
Difficult for Tim to sit there with a straight face as the horrendously sort of shit-coloured sauce dripped over his face, and equally very, very difficult for me. And I think we did have to retake it 2 or 3 times. The one they used, of course, was brilliant, where it really all slid down the front of his face.
I am overwhelmed by your intellect. Will you marry me?
And so it was that Trendy Timbo won the hand of Caroline Cook in marriage. The rest of the delectable Caroline went to Graham, except the bit that went to Bill.
I'm told I appeared in the Goodies, but I acted with all these people so many times that I can't actually recall individual occasions anymore. I mean, this is 30 years ago, you know, we were doing stuff every week.
And now for something completely... Kids program!
It certainly wasn't a children's show. And I think if you analyse the scripts and you analyse the actual films themselves, you'll find that the actual subject matter and the way that they treated the subject matter is in their own very individual style. Kids loved it. So did bishops, so did lawyers.
Fine for all the family. Goody.
There's much more adventurous, surprising, occasionally tasteless material of the kind that I would have been very proud. But the audience's eye was taken off that ball.
There was slight criticism from certain quarters of Bill smoking his sherbet dab. He was sucking it. Suddenly visions would come up, had nothing to do with drugs, whatever.
He's on a trip. He's away.
Oh, what's he on? What's he got in there?
It's only lemon sherbet. Lemon sherbet!
Being a hippie, I had to be into certain substances. But in my case, it was sherbet, and we just thought it was a device for me to come up with solutions to problems.
Why are they trying to start the beefeaters?
Hang on, I think we're getting something.
Quite often we got away with things because they thought it was innocent. And in a way they were innocent, but it was... They would have questioned a lot of things more if they hadn't thought we were nice boys.
Keep sucking, you fool!
In fact, the public thought they were such nice boys that they got some fan mail they really did not want.
Mary Whitehouse wrote us a letter saying what good, clean family fun it was, which we tried to live down after that.
There was a lot of doom and gloom. I mean, for goodness sake, we had to insult them thereafter to get our credibility back.
And we actually did a programme having a go at Mary Whitehouse. She was called Desiree Carthorse, and Beryl Reid played her.
Who are you?
Mrs. Desiree Carthorse.
Of the Keep Filth Off television campaign?
The same.
People done up in leather, whipping people, everything. And she still didn't complain. You thought, what the dickens do you have to do to get this woman to complain?
It might have passed Mrs. Whitehouse by, but the Goodies satirical material was about to get them in trouble with the BBC itself.
South African tourist board, through door and turn white.
We reckon the BBC was slightly worried about upsetting South Africa at the time. And we'd recorded it and got a lot of laughs. And they said, no, it didn't get laughs. And we said, well, we've got the laughs.
Hey! You're not black, are you? You've got very fuzzy hair. I just washed it. Never can tell.
For the sake of the story, all the black people left South Africa, but the Boers and people like that needed to beat somebody up.
And eventually we came up with apartheid.
Apartheid.
Which meant that anybody under 5'4" was discriminated against.
I've got my rights!
No more you haven't.
We had a lot of, let's say, anti-apartheid jokes in it.
You made it look as if South Africa was full of black people having a good time.
Well, it is full of black people.
But they're not having a good time.
Good satirical stuff. But the BBC, whoa, we got called in and they were not going to put this one out.
They said it was unfair to the South African police, who we were a bit critical of. This being just after there'd been Sharpeville massacre and shootings.
Whatever his race, colour or creed, a man is a man. He has dignity, intelligence and the ability to... Wash the dishes, cook the dinner, sweep the floor. No, that's degrading. Well, you're doing it. Only because all the knickknacks have gone.
A pity the terminology they use to get their anti-apartheid message across seems as antiquated now as that brand of South African politics. Mind you, it was all in line with the way they approached another oppressed group of the time, women.
There must have been a period, maybe sort of 5 years or so after those were made, when it would have been almost impossible to show them because they would have been so un-PC and so anti-feminist and extraordinarily sort of crude and corny and vulgar that I don't think the public would have accepted them. Look at them now, they've acquired a sort of post-ironic artiness, a bit like the Carry On films or Benny Hill has, you know, that looking up girls' skirts as so sort of awful. And even looking up the guys' shorts, you know, has acquired so many other layers that it's got a very different feeling watching it now. One watches it with a kind of fondness and laughing at it in a far more reflected way. I mean, it's because it's bounced off all sorts of other things in between.
As if writing the goodies wasn't enough work, Graham and Bill found time for a reunion with John Cleese, contributing scripts to the London Weekend television series based on Richard Gordon's Doctor in the House books. And in 1972, Graham Garden came up with an idea that would save time and money, a radio quiz show that required no script. Naturally enough, the BBC jumped at it, and I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, which also starred Tim Brooke-Taylor, is still running scriptlessly today. Other diversions included teaming up with the rest of the Oxbridge Mafia to make London theatre-goers an offer they couldn't refuse, making a small fortune for charity.
The Amnesty International shows, which were marvellous reunions. And the other Pythons appeared in them quite a lot, and the Goodies certainly did one or two of those shows.
Do you think there will be a certain healthy rivalry between you and the Monty Python team?
I don't think so. I think we're all in it together.
Even though the Goodies had achieved some amazing things in their long run, from monster viewing figures to success in the pop charts, there was one last mission to accomplish, a final Everest to climb, to get up the nose of Mary Whitehouse.
She actually sent a telegram to the Director General of the BBC complaining about one of the shows we did, which featured a carrot.
Tim Brooke-Taylor had to dress up to go out like John Travolta, and when he was dressing up, he had a pair of underpants, Y-fronts, with a carrot on the front. And that did it. And we got the letters from Mary Whitehouse in all the papers, you know, disgraceful, the Goodies ought to be banned, you know, for flashing their carrots.
Complaints from Mary Whitehouse may have been good for the Goodies' street cred, but the BBC was not amused. It wasn't keen either on the escalating costs of the show's visual gimmickry. So when it came to a new contract, things moved very slowly indeed, and left the Goodies feeling distinctly unwanted.
There is a natural cycle of things. And if something new comes along which is both progressive and funny, you want the chance to do it. You can't just rely on something going on forever.
We felt that after a fairly decent track record and we'd won some prizes and got good audiences, that they weren't being very loving towards us at that stage. And that really was sort of the end of it. ITV were keen for us to come to London Weekend.
And so, reluctantly, in 1981, the Goodies took a deep breath and moved to the other side. It was the beginning of the end for the Goodies, a final series which ironically had some of their highest viewing figures ever.
End of your expenses.
Only one thing for it?
Yes. Bill? Yeah? You're fired.
I think it might have come as a bit of a shock to them when we started actually making the shows. Probably how much they cost, and just the amount of resources that you needed to actually service, a show like the Goodies.
They made one Christmas special and then one series, and after that thought they actually couldn't afford to make any more, so they didn't.
The way the Goodies finally ended was, frankly, very unsatisfactory and a real shame.
People say to me, you probably didn't want to do any more, did you? Yes, I want to do hundreds more. And then I calmed down.
Here was a problem the Goodies couldn't handle, the killer ITV contract. Legally, they had to go their separate ways, only joining forces again in 1983 to provide the voices for a programme that was definitely for children, Banana Man.
Eric is Banana Man.
Luckily, Tim and Graham have always had their Radio 4 show to fall back on, and fall back heavily they do, to the delight of millions.
Wallaby, someone aspiring to be a kangaroo.
Tim I've worked with forever on I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue on the radio.
And Bill, well, I think he was last seen somewhere near a boulder, somewhere north of the border, but it might have been a bush, not certain.
And so, there we have it. At last, undeniable proof that the comedy ostrich is not, in fact, extinct.
Bill Oddie has become one of the nation's favourite naturalists, a sort of Attenborough with attitude, and has ingeniously managed to combine what he likes doing best, bird-watching, with his personality of slightly disgruntled ex-Goodie.
I just remember that bit where that giant white cat knocked down the post office tower. Very good, Bill. Comedy classic.
This is not the appropriate time, nor place, to discuss the Goodies, all right? Do you realise it's our 30th anniversary? You'd think they'd show a few repeats, wouldn't you?
Tim Brooke-Taylor regularly appears on TV and radio, starring in comedies like You Must Be the Husband, and he recently achieved a lifetime's ambition by guesting in one of the biggest farces of them all.
Of course, one of the highlights of my career has been in Crossroads this last year, where I was the gay partner of the chef. I was dead within a week. I've always wanted to be in a soap.
Graham Garden has appeared in Peak Practice and Holby City, proving that all that medical training hasn't gone totally